The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Swerve. This is your guest, Vince Russo. Today, I have a show that quite honestly, I've been looking forward to for a long time. And I'll tell you why. Listen, you know in the past, the top of my guest lists are people that I had, really close relationships to, that I was friends with, that I knew inside and out, and, bringing them on the show was like just having like a conversation with an old buddy. So it was easy. There were never any, moments of uncertainty. It was just rather easy. Today's guest is a little bit different, and I'll tell you why, but I purposely brought him on for a reason. Now, many of you know, obviously, that I worked for TNA for well over a decade. And one thing I always talk about with TNA was it wasn't very easy for me working with a much younger generation. You got to remember in TNA, a big chunk of the roster was really 20-something guys. A lot of guys just starting in the business. TNA was their first stomping ground. I give all the credit to, Jeff Jarrett, giving guys, the opportunity. But it was really their first experience, on television with a big wrestling company. I'm used to working with the veterans, the Austins and the Rocks and, Hogan and Flair and guys like this. So, all of a sudden I'm put in a situation where I'm working with talent where these guys are literally the ages of my sons. And there was a generation gap. There was a problem there. There was a difference in philosophy. I didn't like the communication. I never felt comfortable with them. I don't feel they felt comfortable with me. I don't feel we were always on the same page. And it always troubled me because I felt like I wasn't able to break through that barrier. And I'll tell you, I'm going to be completely honest with you. There are some guys that I'm talking about that won't even talk to me now. They don't like me. They hate me. They won't talk to me. I knew this guy would be different, and I'll tell you why. Because I think he fits in that category, and we're going to talk a lot about this, but this guy is like the most respectful of that. I like to call him, listen, no disrespect to my guest, I like to call them Generation Me. But this guy was kind of on the fringe because one of the most respectful young men I've ever met, not only in the wrestling business, but in life in general, for somebody his age, very, very respectful. And that's why I knew when I'd extended the olive branch, he'd come on and we'd talk about these things and maybe get a better understanding, for what it was that we both maybe were going through with TNA. So first and foremost, I so much appreciate him coming on the show. I think it's very big of him. I'm a huge fan of his, not only as a wrestler, as a human being, and we're going to talk about that. And I'm talking about the one and only Chris Sabin. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, especially after that nice introduction. Gosh, I'm flattered. Thank you.
Chris, I got to ask you because I'm very, intuitive. So, I got to see a little bit more of the background where you are, and then you kind of moved over. But, bro, I kind of saw a little untidy there, Chris, a little bit of a mess. Is that can I assume that's a bachelor pad?
Yeah, oh, yes. I live by myself. Well, I have a house, but actually I live in the basement. The basement is kind of like my own. I have my own bedroom, my own little living room, my own kitchen down here. So, yeah, that's probably why it's messy.
Chris, can you kind of turn the phone and just give everybody what a bachelor, because this is going to make sense in a minute. Let everybody see. Look, the unmade bed. Look at, beautiful, the cat for crying. Look at this. That's a thing of beauty. Look at this.
There's the closet right there. Clothes all over.
Oh my God, Chris. Oh. Chris, that's, listen, bro, I'm all for bachelor pads, but that's bad, bro. That's bad.
Well, I think that I heard somewhere that pretty smart people are slobs lots of the time. So I just kind of equated that. I try to think of myself as maybe it's just because I'm smart that I'm so much of a slob, you know. That's probably not true.
Chris, literally, when is the last time we cleaned that room?
Probably at least a couple months for sure.
Oh my God. Now, Chris, listen, there's a reason why I bring that up, and I had you give us a little tour. Because I want to bring something up off the bat. You know, we'll break the ice a little bit before we get into the more heavier stuff, okay? First of all, let me set the ground rules for you because I got to do this going in so it's an even playing field. You know, a lot of people refer to me as, you know, the Oprah of podcasts. I've had people, Chris, cry on this show before. I've made people cry on the show before, Chris. And I kind of like that. I'll be honest with you. It makes me feel very Oprah-ish. But I'm going to open up this on a entertaining note, and this is the absolute truth, Chris. Okay, I remember, bro, when I was working at TNA. Okay. And all of a sudden, bro, like, you know, bro, listen, I'm not going to dwell on this, but it's important that I mention her because it's an important part of the story, okay? Bro, I always thought, listen, bro, Velvet Sky, like, just unbelievable. And I think the great thing about Velvet, Chris, is it's not, you have to know her because it's not just the way she looks, but she shouldn't have the personality for somebody that looks like that. I mean, she should be an absolute biatch, but she's an absolute sweetheart. So when you put the looks with the personality, it's like she's a dream girl, right? So, you know, Chris, I remember one day, like, we're in a creative meeting and it comes up that Chris Sabin is now dating Velvet Sky. So, like, I'm like, what? Chris, how the freak did Chris Sabin get? So then, Chris, now the person starts explaining to me that, you know, Vince, I don't think you understand. All the girls love Chris. Every girl wants to go out with Chris. Every knockout dreams about going out with Chris. And, bro, I always knew Chris as this laid-back guy. You know, listen, I know guys that give the line and give the girls the business. Chris was this laid-back, cool guy. And then all of a sudden, bro, I'm hearing these tales of, like, how you are the womanizer and the cats meow and these girls are... Bro, I was shocked, Chris, because I didn't see that with your personality. Is that true, Chris?
I would say, yeah, I'm definitely a womanizer. Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. But, you know, I don't get the women by, you know, putting that effort forth. I think I get it much in the opposite way. Because I'm so laid back and because I don't put that much of an effort forth, I don't try really hard. I think that girls actually kind of like that. Because it's something different, you know.
Yeah, no, well, Chris, that's what threw me off because I'm used to these other guys. Listen, when a girl's attractive, they let it be known, the flirting, the every line in the book. But, bro, you were so, like, you know, in the weeds. I never expected that from you, bro. And I got to tell you, I kind of popped huge. And from that point on, I really looked at you differently.
Really? Well, I hope it's differently in a good way, you know, but what can I say? Women are my weakness.
Hey, Chris, I got to ask you this, though. Now, please be totally honest with me. Bro, you do not bring the women to the place we are looking at, do you, bro?
Well, I haven't in a long time, but of course I...
Bro, have you ever lost a girlfriend in the room? Like, did she ever just get lost in the clutter and you found her like 5 days later?
Of course not. But I've heard like shouts of pain from stepping on stuff on, you know, oh, sorry, you know, must have left something on the floor there, you know.
Oh, okay. Now, Chris, I want to, yeah, bro, I don't like to talk a lot about, you know, the wrestling and the matches and, oh, you're 18-time X Division champion. I like to talk about Chris the person. I like to talk about, you know, you as people, learn stuff about you, let other people find stuff about you that they don't know. Now, I know, Chris, you know, your origins came with Scott D'Amore, but you were on the Detroit border, correct?
Yeah, I live about 30 minutes outside the city.
How did you first hook up with Scott?
So I actually started at a school, the NWA Great Lakes School in Michigan, and I was training there for a little bit. The school started experiencing difficulties and basically didn't have a place to run anymore. So I knew a guy by the name of Amazing Nate who was actually coming into that school, and he was trained by D'Amore, and he suggested that I go over there. He said it's a really good school. So he brought me over, introduced me to Scott, and then I just started going over there and training for months and months after that.
Now, Chris, listen. Every question I ask you is literally out of respect and out of me just like literal. I don't know. I don't have a problem, bro, asking a question I don't know. Here's one thing that I found, Chris, and I want to hear if there is any, if there is anything to my theory of how I think over the years the professional wrestler has changed and transformed. Okay, now, Chris, I know for a fact, correct me if I'm wrong, not only you, but, your generation, I was around that locker room enough, with the guys like AJ Styles and people like that. Now, Chris, your generation, big-time gamers, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
At what age, Chris, did that start?
For me, I can't even pinpoint the age because my dad actually is a computer engineer. So I've always been around some sort of computer game or what it be. It started in the Commodore 64, Atari 2600, Nintendo, Super Nintendo. It just kind of as my life went on, I've always played the next video game and the next video game and the next video game. So it's just kind of been like a normal thing with me. And I think just like being my age and my generation, it's like, as we came up, it's kind of like the video game generation, because as the video games became more popular, it's kind of like us growing up. They started to become popular when we were children, so it just kind of stuck with us throughout our entire lives.
Well, Chris, I want to talk, and that, bro, video game generation, that's a great way to put it, because this is my mindset. This is what I think. I could be absolutely wrong. I'm just going by experience and trying to put the pieces together, working around people like you and AJ and guys at that age that I know loved the video games. Now, the brand of wrestling that I grew up on, Chris, I'm talking about, when guys didn't leave their feet. Chief J. Strongbow never left his feet. King Kong Bundy never left his feet. All of a sudden now you have this whole brand of just, aerial moves and death-defying chances that I'd never seen in wrestling before. Now, Chris, my theory is that a lot of the guys in your age bracket, the video game era, were you inspired by wrestling video games? What was that? Because you couldn't have seen somebody doing the things that you guys eventually did. So, where did that whole change of the philosophy of wrestling, how did that come about as it pertains to you?
I think it's partly video games. Definitely video games have had an influence, because especially the N64 game generation, that group of games, WCW versus NWO World Tour, No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, those N64 games, the engine on it had such a wide variety of moves that you could do that was programmed to the system, and you could see all sorts of stuff that you've never seen before, because I think it was a Japanese company that actually programmed everything into it, so it had that influence of Japanese style. I think it's also partly that with my generation, it's pro wrestling started to be popular when I was a child. So I think a lot of people that are around the same age as me, as they were growing up, even though they might be smaller people, they still had the dream of wanting to be a pro wrestler. So realizing that even though they are smaller, that they would have to do different kind of things like leaving our feet just to be able to stand out and make yourself different from, the classic heavyweight.
But Chris, was there somebody you were watching that were doing things similar to what you wound up doing that inspired you, or was it the video games? Because, I'm just curious. I know, Chris, you're about 32, right?
33, yep.
33. So when you go back, how old were you when you started watching wrestling?
Oh, I can't remember. It was before 11 years old. It started taking over my life.
So 20 years ago. So, yeah. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking 20 years ago, who could Chris Sabin have been watching that would have given him the idea of the style of wrestling, that he brought out to the public, when he was a 22, 23-year-old kid? Where did that come from?
I think the style actually would more so come from watching like the WCW cruiserweights, because that was around 1996 when I was a freshman in high school, and that was when I was actually realistically thinking, wow, I could actually become a wrestler, because I'm seeing guys like Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero on television, and they're bringing like a completely different style, and almost think like, wow, these guys are about my size. So I say that for me, influencing my style, I would say that probably, the WCW Cruiserweight era, probably more so than video games.
Okay, so Chris, basically what you're saying, and that's why I love having this conversation, because now when I hear you, I understand it and it makes sense. So now you have this love for wrestling and you want to become a wrestler. Now you're seeing some of the smaller guys on WCW. So now you're realizing, if I want to become a wrestler because of my size, that's what I have to do.
Yes, definitely.
But Chris, let me ask you this. Why didn't you think, because there were also some guys at that size that had like over-the-top personalities. So why didn't you think like, I may be small, but maybe if I have this unique character that nobody else saw before, nobody else ever did, that would be my road into wrestling. Why didn't you look at it that way?
I wish I would have, honestly. I think that I probably would have had a lot more success in my career if I would have seen it from that point of view. But unfortunately, I didn't. I think my mindset, for especially at that age, and even for a lot of my career, was more so focusing on the wrestling part as opposed to the personality, larger-than-life personality part. I think that's only started to sink in the last 5 years or so.
Well, Chris, do you think that had a lot to do with like the person you were growing up? Like, what kind of a kid were you? Like, were you out there? Did you have over-the-top personality? Because one thing I found out about the younger guys, and like especially you and Alex, Shelley, it took me a while to get used to it, but after being around you guys for a while, like I found out you guys really had a dry sense of humor. but bro, once I understood that, it was funny, but like I didn't get it right away. So as a kid, were you a little shy? Were you a little introverted? Did that maybe not give you confidence in saying, you know what, I can go out and be this bigger than life character that could draw money?
Yeah, I think it does stem from just who I am as a regular person. I am really laid back, just chill, easygoing. I don't really have like this huge kind of strong personality as a regular human being. And I think that probably has a lot to do with it too, because, like they say, the best kind of, wrestling personality is like an extension of your normal personality. So it's kind of like, I've always tried to find that balance of utilizing my dry sense of humor as, integrating it into my character, which is not the easiest thing to do, because it's not the normal thing of what pro wrestlers are.
Okay. Yeah, now, Chris, let me ask you this, because, again, I think this relates back to the background. Bro, the things you did, I was privy to a lot of it. I saw a lot of it. Bro, those aren't things like, you can't, like, just teach those things to anybody. You have to be able to do it. Again, going to the background, Chris, was there any kind of sports involved? Was there skateboarding involved? Was there BMXing involved? Like, what planted the seeds for the light bulb to go off in your mind and say, you know what? I may be able to do things in a wrestling ring that people never saw before. You had to be doing something physical, growing up. I mean, I'm sure that didn't just come out of nowhere.
No, I've actually played sports my entire life. I played soccer since I was a little kid. I played, as far as leagues go, just throughout growing up, I played soccer, basketball. I did baseball, track and field. I was on the wrestling team. So basically, sports were a really, really big part of my life growing up, which is weird because I'm not necessarily the biggest sports fan. I don't really like watching. I like participating. So it's always like, I'm not very knowledgeable about sports other than, I watch Detroit sports teams because I need someone to cheer for. But yeah, other than that, I've always been more of like about participating in it other than being an observer.
Okay, now Chris, let me ask you this, and you got to understand, bro. I'm asking you as a total Marc because the wrestling business has changed. You know, there's no doubt about it, and I'm trying to educate myself, really getting to the roots of how it has changed. And talking to you is perfect for me. Now, when you go to train with Coach D'Amore, right? Is that who you train with?
Right now?
No, when you first started.
When I first started, yeah. Like, are you talking about going to wrestling school?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Now listen, bro. Let's face it, you and I, Chris. No disrespect. Scott D'Amore ain't going to be doing no Kuna Humradas off the top rope, bro. You know, short, stocky.
Do a moonsault. He could do a moonsault.
I'm sure he could. And I love Scott, Chris. But Chris, I gotta believe. You know, I know Scott. You know, I know Scott's build. I know, Scott was an agent, so I know Scott's background a little bit. But Chris, I gotta believe, like, now when you're going to train as a wrestler, especially with somebody like Scott, I have to believe, like, it's the nuts and bolts of the mat wrestling techniques. It's the basics of wrestling. Is that what you're being taught first?
Yes, definitely. Like, me and Scott talked about this once before. We both kind of agreed, like, the original school that I started at, it kind of like taught me how to wrestle, how to headlock, take bumps, how to run the ropes, the very basics of it. Scott taught me how to work. He taught me about, like you said, the little fundamentals, like things about selling, putting a match together, making a match flow, when to do what, and stuff like that. So Scott taught me how to work. The other school kind of taught me how to wrestle.
But when you say about taught me how to wrestle, what kind of wrestling are we talking about, Chris? Is that when, the high flyer, Chris Sabin, is that where you're developing? And how are you developing? And the reason why I asked that, Chris, is you did a lot of things in the wrestling ring I had never saw before. So if you're getting trained in that style, like, how does that work, Chris? Are you learning specific moves? Are you developing your own moves and mastering them? From an X Division perspective, what is that education?
I don't think there is any sort of education other than self-education as far as that stuff goes. None of that was ever learned, like going to either wrestling school. Basically, the only thing learned in wrestling school are the basics. And everything else is kind of on your own, but you gotta, a lot of it is just from watching wrestling, just being a wrestling fan, watching Japanese wrestling, watching British style wrestling, watching like cruiserweight wrestling, basically just being influenced and learning new styles. And while you're watching stuff, you can almost be inspired to, almost like alter something. If you see something, then you can think like, wow, that was really cool, but what if I did it this way? And then you can create something new like that.
Okay, let me ask you this, though, Chris. Now, Chris, you get your training from Scott, then you go to another school, then you start working independently. Now, Chris, I have to imagine this. I got to imagine when you're working independently now, there are a lot of old-school traditional wrestlers, from the old school who have that kind of a style. So now when all of a sudden you're working independently and some guys may be traditional, some guys may be out of the new school like you were. How does that work, Christy? You kind of have to seek out those wrestlers that have your wrestling style, because all of a sudden, if you're developing this new style and you're in there with a an old school traditional wrestler, the kind of guy that doesn't want to leave his feet, how do you develop your style on the indie network before you get to TNA?
Well, I think one of the most important things that you can be in wrestling is adaptable. Like, not to have just one style, but be able to adapt to whatever your opponent is, because you're not going to be in there with the same kind of guy over and over. You're not going to be able to choose who you're wrestling on the card. You're going to show up, and the booker is going to tell you what you're doing and who you're working. So I think that not studying any one style of wrestling, but still watching a big guy, little guy match every once in a while, watching two little guys go at it, watching tag team matches, 6-man matches, mixed tag matches, anything you can see to try and see how they do it, how it's done, and how you can adapt your own style to someone else. And then I've always prided myself on being able to wrestle anyone. Doesn't matter if I was wrestling Abyss on Impact or Sanjay Dutt in the singles. I felt like we could mesh well and still have a good match either way.
Now, Chris, you come to you come to TNA, and there is the whole X division. Now, Chris, here's something that I always thought was an issue. I want to see how you feel about this. Okay, when Jeff Jarrett first introduced the X division, and I remember, bro, because I saw the first match. I was at the second TNA show. I wasn't I watched the first one at TV. And I remember, bro, I remember it was a 6-man. I can remember some of the participants, not all. I know AJ was in it. I know Jerry Lynn was in it. I know Psychosis was in it. It was a 3-on-3. And Chris, I sat back and I was like, holy freaking crap. I had never seen anything like that before. But Chris, I feel like that was part of the problem. And I'll tell you why. I consider guys like, you and Alex, and maybe when the Young Bucks came in, and, Sanjay and Jay Lethal and guys like that, you were almost like the second tier of the X Division wrestlers in TNA, because you had that first bunch, which AJ Styles was a part of. Mm-hmm. And I think, Chris, what happened was those first guys, Jerry Lynn too, and Jerry, to his credit, because he was much older, but I think those guys raised the bar so high that it was like almost up here when it was your guys' turn. So like a lot of the stuff that you guys were doing, some of it, was unique, we had never seen before, but some of it we had. So like I think by the time we got to you guys, the X Division had lost a little bit, like I said, because the bar was raised so high. Did you feel that at all? Did you get to see those guys perform before you guys came in?
Yeah, yes, I did. But I mean, if you think about, like, you're talking about the second tier, I guess I would consider like the second tier, like myself, mm-hmm. Frankie Kazarian, Michael Shane, mm-hmm. Probably. Well, I guess Amazing Red would be the first tier. But then you look back at the first tier, and it's like AJ Styles, Low Key, mm-hmm. the Amazing Red, like. Those three guys compared to, us three, there's really a big difference in styles too, especially like Frankie Kazarian, myself, and Michael Shane. You're not going to be seeing us doing as so many flips as, Low Key, AJ Styles, and the Amazing Red. I think that was one of the big things, that those guys were just so aerially gifted, and we were more like innovative moves, definitely some high flying, but more innovative moves and more of like a technical style as opposed to those guys. I think that's probably kind of where some of it got lost too.
Oh, okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, I never really looked at it that way. So the style really from tier 1 to tier 2 changed a little bit.
Yes, I definitely think so.
Hey, Chris, this was always the ongoing battle in the creative room. And I'm not even talking about creative, because creatively, Chris, we would just kind of make the matches. This is who we need to win. This is who we need to lose. Then when you go to TV and you get with the agents, that's where the psychology of the match comes in. That's why it pisses me off all the time, because, when there's a bad finish to a match, it's Vince Russo's fault because he wrote it. People don't understand the integral part that the agent plays in the in-ring product. And Chris, there were battles every week for 10 years. For 10 years, bro. Okay, should this be a car wreck, or do we need to slow these guys down and put philosophy in the match? And then the argument was always, well, if we slow the guys down and put psychology in the match, why are we calling it the X Division? And it went back to the original X Division. AJ, Low Key, Red, and those guys, the flying around, no wrong, but it was a spectacle. So now all of a sudden, in the agents meeting, there's the constant battle. Is this a car crash? with no psychology, or are we slowing down the pace and adding psychology? What do you feel about that? If you were in that room, what would you have said about that conversation?
I mean, I would say try to find a balance between the two. It's a really difficult thing to do, but I think you can find a balance between keeping that X Division car crash kind of style, but utilizing psychology as well. And I think that if you look at the popular style of wrestling nowadays, it's X Division. Like, that's what, like, indies are becoming now. The independent scene, NXT, it reminds me of the X Division. I think it's what the X Division created. The guys are smaller. It's the new style of wrestling. And I think that, you know, the more people wrestle this style, that the more, I don't know, the better it gets. The more it fits that fine line, that balance between, you know, psychology and making it car crash style. I think it's really hard to say, but I think you can find that balance.
Chris, I have to believe, bro, as a performer, did you feel like, you know, from management, you were always getting pulled in those two different directions? I mean, did it become an issue? Did it become, what the frick do these guys want?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you feel like you're being pushed, then you're being pulled, and then one person says something that contradicts what the other person says, then you don't know what you do. You're in the middle, you don't know who to ask. Like, of course that happens sometimes, but then what are you going to do? You just got to go out there and, like, you know, execute your performance the best you can.
Yeah. Chris, let me see how you feel about this. And we're going to talk about this, because this is what frustrated me the most. I'll be totally honest. I am a character-driven guy. I'm a character-driven guy. I'm a storyline-driven guy. Everybody knows that. That goes back to my background and the wrestling that I was brought up on. That's where it comes from. I was you know, you as a wrestler, that's why you're a wrestler and I was a writer. You as a wrestler, you're drawn to the Dean Malenkos and the cruiserweights and what these guys are doing in the ring. Me as a writer, I'm drawn to the characters and the stories. It's just the way we were raised. Here's where my frustration used to come in, Chris. When there was an X Division match, you know, so to speak, you know, I'm walking around the back all day, you know, working with everybody, but, you know, perceiving everything that's going around. And, you know, usually when it came to the X Division guys, Chris, I would always see, you know, you guys off by yourselves. You know, this is what I'd see literally. You're talking to yourself, you're literally, bro, and I see it, and I never interrupted. You're memorizing 100 spots in your mind for a match. If you're lucky, it's 6 minutes. And every X Division guy's like, then they'd get with their opponent, go over it, go by. This is what I'm constantly seeing. Now, Chris, understand where I'm coming from. See, now we're closing the gap here. Chris, I'm 20 years older than you, for crying out loud. We got to close the gap here, Chris. Chris, here's where my frustration came. I want to see how you feel about this. Because now I'm sitting back, I'm watching all this. Now the match takes place, and this is what I see. These guys, the X Division guys, your generation, they're so... they have to remember so many moves in the match. You know, that's what's going through that. There's so much happening so quickly. They have to memorize every step in the match. But in the meantime, Chris, once that match took place in the ring, because you guys were so focused on remembering spots, in my opinion, Chris, the first thing that went out the window was the character. In other words, Chris Sabin would sell something a certain way. Chris Sabin would play to the crowd a certain way. That certain way would be different than Alex Shelley or somebody else. But what I saw is, you know, you guys were so set on memorizing every spot and getting in every spot to perfection that it's almost like I'm not thinking about my character while I'm in the ring. How would Chris Sabin react to these certain situations? And what I found was, because of that, Chris, every X Division wrestler, to me, this is just me now, was starting to look the same. Because all the emphasis was being put on the match and not the personality. And, you know, my whole thing in the chair that I was in was, how am I going to get these guys over individually unless we can concentrate on that character and make them stand out and make them different? That was always the battle with me. And here was the battle, Chris. I knew that's what you guys wanted to do. And I knew you guys loved it. But I also knew from my experience, listen, man, until these guys have a personality, until these guys have a character, until these guys make themselves stand out, the wrestling alone is not going to get them over. So like that was my constant battle. It's not that I disagreed with what you guys were doing, because you guys were the greatest athletes in the world, but I knew if you didn't have this part of it, it was going to be difficult getting you over. How do you feel about that? Honest answer, Chris, shoot from the hip. How do you feel about all that, just from what was going through my mind?
Sure, I think that's a valid point, and I agree that having that personality, be able to connect with the audience on a personal level like that, really draws someone more into your character, because that's what it's about, is about having an emotional connection with your audience. I think part of it just has to do with, the immaturity of the X Division. We were a bunch of young 20-something-year-old guys, all thrown on national television, wanting to do the very best we could possibly do, and just being, I don't know, I don't want to say overly ambitious, but just, wanting to be the very best we could be and be something different, just that drive to go out there and put on the best possible performance that we could do while being different at the same time. But I think your point is completely valid.
Hey, Chris, I hate to interrupt you, but I want to, because if I don't ask you right away, I'm old and I forget things. Chris, being that you guys were so innovative, were you guys of course you're not going to say this, but was Chris Sabin personally, was there that feeling that, oh my God, AJ just did this, I got to come up with something to top him? Or, oh man, Alex, seriously, individually, that's the competitive spirit. But was there ever that kind of pressure where, oh my God, these guys are doing this, that, and the other, I got to come up with something new?
Of course. But that was always within me. It wasn't like, hey guys, we got to do something. That was always something that I would think of myself, internally within my own mind, all right, I better step it up because look what these guys are doing, for sure, without a doubt. And I'm sure conversations have happened where we would see something that would happen earlier in the show and our match would be later on in the night. We'd see, we would get together and say, hey, did you see what those guys did? Dude, we got to do something, and we would just add a spot or add something differently, specifically because of what happened earlier in the show, of course.
Hey, Chris, let me ask you this. So basically, and I'm setting you up for a joke here. So basically, Chris, you're telling me you've matured over the years.
I would say so, yeah.
Well, maybe it's time to clean your room then. Anyway, I had to get that in there. Chris,
hey, that's okay.
This. Bro, Chris, this is totally honest. We're ripping down. Remember, Dixie Carter always says she's going to rip down the curtain, but she never does. Me and you are going to rip down the curtain here. I was in enough of those meetings, bro, with old school guys that never got the X Division. Didn't want to have anything to do with the X Division. Because, bro, you know, the knee-jerk reaction, Chris, is if you don't understand something, get rid of it. That's the old school mentality. Don't try to learn it. Don't try to get in the psyche of these minds. If I don't understand it, it's wrong. Get rid of it. I worked with a lot of people at TNA like that. I'll be honest with you. They didn't understand the X Division. They because the lack of psychology. They didn't want it. It wasn't wrestling. The whole 9 yards. As X Division competitors, did you guys ever feel that way in the locker room? As it related to management and maybe some of the other old school wrestlers, did you ever feel like, man, we got to keep fighting for what we believe in? Did it get difficult at times?
Oh yeah, for sure. There was times where we would just want to come together and be like, stand up for ourselves and say, hey, we deserve more TV time, or we deserve this, or we deserve that. We work so hard and we give so much of our body with the style of wrestling that we do to you. We want some of that to be reciprocated. But as far as in the locker room, though, I know we always had our own locker room. We were always in the X Division locker room. We were never like, we never interacted. Yeah.
And bro, what were you doing in the X Division locker room?
Oh, I'd be setting up games, playing mini golf, playing Mario Kart, playing with a Santa suit, playing practical jokes on each other.
Exactly, bro. And Chris, what's the thing too? Like, and so Chris, like, I always felt there was a communication gap between me and you guys. I always felt like you guys didn't like me because of what I represent, and I never didn't like you guys ever. But this is what used to frustrate me, and I'm sure now you're the more mature Chris Sabin. You're going to clean your room after this interview. But Chris, you know what I used to look at? And I think you're 32 now, you said?
33.
And I think you'll appreciate this at 33. Bro, this is what I used to look at. I used to look at what you guys did in the ring. I knew you guys loved wrestling. You eat, you breathe, everything's wrestling. I know that. But I also knew what I saw you guys do in the ring, you're not going to have a long career in wrestling. You're not going to have longevity. Bro, you should know better than anybody with the injuries you have. When you're taking those types of risks, more injuries, cutting the career short. So part of what I'm trying to do is, bro, I want you guys to be able to do what you love to do when you're 40 years old. Bro, I don't care what anybody says. I know Mick Foley, and I guarantee you, if you go up to Mick Foley now and say, Mick, do you regret doing some of the things you can't? I can't imagine what it's like being Mick Foley getting out of bed every morning. But I bet you if Mick could do some of those things differently, perhaps he would, just to get the longevity out of your career so you could do what you love doing for a longer time and make more money. Chris, did that ever cross your mind at all?
I don't think it did until I actually had my injuries back to back, when because basically I was forced to just sit at home and think about it. And that really opened up my eyes to like, wow, I really need to alter my in-ring style if I do want to be doing this for the next, 10, 15 years, which I do. I definitely want to. I would like to wrestle as long as I can because it's what I love to do. But changing my in-ring style, I'm not going to be able to wrestle at 35 the way I wrestled at 25. There's just absolutely no way.
Hey, Chris, I got to ask you a stupid question because, bro, I really don't know how this works. I don't know how this works. You had two major injuries at TNA. I know one was the ACL. What was the other one?
It was, my right ACL, then my left ACL.
Back to back.
Back to back,
Now,
yep.
Chris, I don't know the answer to this. This is why I'm getting educated. Now, bro, while how long were you out for?
It was about 2 years total, maybe just a little under 2 years. There was a little period where I came back for about a month and a half in between the injuries because I only had like 7, 8, 9 matches in between before I got injured again. So
now, Chris, how are you getting paid during that I honestly don't know, bro. That time you're home, how does the pay work?
Yeah. I
Okay.
still got something. It wasn't. Well, it was kind of strange for me because under one injury I was under one contract, and then the second injury I was under a different contract, and they were both under different terms. So it was, but I was still able to get a little something to be able to at least pay my bills and get by.
What about like the medical expenses? You had to get your own insurance and everything, and that's how it was covered?
I had my own insurance, yes.
Chris, I got to ask you a question. I never asked this question before. What does a professional wrestler pay for their own health policy?
Well, I tell you what, it's I don't know. Let's see. What did I?
Do you tell them what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I tell them I'm an independent contractor, of course.
But do you explain what you do?
I don't think there was ever a chance to, or a reason to be able to explain what I did. I think everyone was just under independent contractor. So I can tell you what I pay now.
When you tell an insurance company, a health insurance company, I'm an independent contractor,
Sure.
They don't know you're a wrestler?
They might. I don't think so.
Oh, see, that's news to me.
Maybe
Because the reason why I'm asking the question is, I'm sure if you told them you were a wrestler, those rates go sky high.
Yeah, I mean, possibly, yeah.
Yeah. What do you pay for health insurance as a single guy as a wrestler?
Now it's over $200 a month.
Oh, and you live in Detroit.
Yeah, outside Detroit, yeah.
Oh, that's nothing though, bro.
Yeah, and it's more now under the new Obamacare law than it was before. Before I was paying like $100 and some a month.
Oh my, that's not bad, bro.
But I never used it though. I had the policy for years. Those 2 knee surgeries are like the only times that I ever used my my insurance because I never liked going to the doctor. Even when I was sick, I didn't like going.
Bro, I hate going to the doctor, bro. I don't. If something's wrong with me, I don't want to know. I just want to keel over. I don't want to think. I don't go to doctors. Hey, Chris, is it easier now? Of course, bro. You and Alex Shelley, bro. I gotta tell you a funny story. Do you know, bro, like how long it took me to figure out what this was?
No,
bro, I kept, bro, for months I'm saying to myself, what the freak are these guys going out there? I didn't have a clue. I think it was Conway that said, bro, you know how Michigan's like the hand? I'm like, oh, my God. But anyway, I have to ask you this, Chris. You and Alex had great success, great chemistry, great everything. Is it easier to be a tag team partner or an individual wrestler?
Easier. It's probably, I guess, depends on how you mean easier. It's easier on the body to be a tag team wrestler because you get to split the workload in half, and it's probably more. I would say it's more creatively fulfilling to wrestle tag matches.
Do you feel like, is some of the pressure off in tag team wrestling compared to going out there by yourself?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Like I said, you're sharing the workload. You're sharing the workload with 3 other guys out there.
Chris, what was the bond between you and Alex? Because it was really like a brotherhood bond. Bro, you put 2 guys together all the time. I know you guys wanted to come together. I know you pushed for it. I'll tell you right now, everybody says, oh, Vince Russo likes to take credit for everything. They love saying that about me, and that's so far from the case. Motor City Machine Guns was your baby. You came up with the name. You came up with everything. You guys pushed being together. That was all on you guys. Now, Chris, you could put any 2 guys together, a Chris Harris and a James Storm and people like this. What was the bond between you and Shelley where you were almost like one wrestler?
Yeah, we were just like brothers. I think we're 2 guys about the same age who grew up in the same area, who both loved wrestling, who both loved similar kinds of music, who both had a similar sense of humor. They were about the same size. It was just, I don't know. It almost just felt like it just fit really well. I'm not sure what it is, but it was just us having some sort of, unnameable bond.
Do you still work a lot with him?
No, he works for New Japan now, and he pretty much exclusively works for New Japan. So, I barely get to see him because he's always going out there for tours.
Are you going to Japan a lot? Because I know you guys love that stuff. Are you doing that a lot, Chris?
No, actually, I'm not. I haven't been going to Japan since I've been to Japan actually since like 2010.
So you're just doing the indies in the States right now?
Independence in the States. I'm actually going out to Europe a lot. I've been to Europe about 4 times since I left TNA, and
we missed each other on that last trip.
Yes, we were
Chris,
both.
You want to hear the truth behind that?
Sure.
Okay, Chris, I'm a 54-year-old man. Keep that in mind now, okay? And Chris, tell me if I'm out of line with this story I'm about to tell you. Chris, I'm a 54-year-old guy. It's not like I'm a wrestler looking to get booked, so I'm going to fly all over the country to wrestle a match. They wanted me to work to me. They came to me and everything like this. So, Chris, I'm asking them leading up to this thing, send me the itinerary, send me the itinerary, send me the itinerary, send me the itinerary, because I got a very bad back, too. And, I went there once before to England, and, bro, they had me in a middle seat. And, bro, by the time I got off the plane, Chris, I couldn't walk. It was brutal. So now the second time, I'm like, send me the itinerary, send me the itinerary, send me the itinerary. Okay, so, bro, they booked my flight the day before I was to leave. So they give me the itinerary the day before I was to leave. Now, Chris, tell me if I was out of line here, honestly, because I called a couple of the guys to ask them, Chris, I live in Denver, Colorado. Okay, so they have me flying from Denver to L.A., which is 2.5 hours. Okay, 5 hours at the L.A. airport to the next flight. Okay, Chris, I go on a flight then after 5 hours at the airport from L.A. to London, which was about 12 hours. I get off at the airport in London. I'm waiting at the airport 2.5 hours to get a flight to Germany. Then, Chris, I get on the flight to Germany, an hour and a half to get to Germany. I get off the plane, and they're driving me straight to the venue for the show. I was like, are you guys out of your freaking... I mean, Chris, it was literally 26 hours of travel and right to the venue. And I had to say to these guys, I'm not a 20-something-year-old that... I'm like, you guys are absolutely nuts. I can't do that. Was I out of line to do that, Chris?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I kind of always hope or expect that, after a long flight like that you'd be able to at least go down, lay down, take a nap, rest up a little bit before having to perform. Obviously you're not going to be able to perform optimally after traveling.
At 54, bro. You know what I'm saying? Chris, I got to ask you this. And listen, this ain't I'm not... Listen, you're not with TNA anymore. I'm not with TNA anymore, bro. I wouldn't even waste my time burying TNA. But like when I feel strongly about something, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it in my seat as a booker and somebody that wrote television. Chris, what's the point of putting the TNA heavyweight title on you? Beating Bully, which was a great moment, which was a great highlight of your career, can really bring Chris Sabin to the next level if done correctly. What's the point of doing something like that only to take it away from you in 3 weeks?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know at all.
I mean, bro, there's no way somebody can have a conversation with me and tell me that doesn't hurt you more than it helps you.
Yeah, it definitely hurt me more than helped me, without a doubt.
Did you get any scuttlebutt behind the scenes? There had to be a reason for it, bro.
I was never told a reason or anything.
Chris, I'll tell you this. I was working there as a consultant, not during that time, but a little afterwards. So I was there for about 10 months, and I got to work with John a little bit. And the one thing I noticed about John was, if there wasn't like an immediate reaction to something, he was on to the next thing. I mean, bro, listen, if you go back and look at TNA, should have never took... I'm not going to say they should have never took the belt off you. They should have never put it on you if that's what they were going to do.
Yeah, I agree. Especially so soon. I mean, it was 2 months after being out for 2 years. It was literally 2 months after coming back, after being out for 2 years. And then before that, I was a tag team wrestler for like 5 years. So it was like I didn't even know who I was as a singles performer at all.
Yeah.
And
Chris, again, I looking at TNA, I mean, bro, they've just, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, prematurely taken the belt off of so many people. They took Magnus, and I told these guys, why are you and they took the belt off Magnus and put it on Eric when they just put the belt on Daniel Bryan, and everybody's going to compare the two. Then that didn't work in 2 weeks, so they took it off of Eric, and man, that's not the way you book. If you're going to commit to putting a belt on a Chris Sabin, you got to go with Chris Sabin, and you were the guy, bro. The people loved you, the fans loved you. You definitely would have had to always fight from underneath, but that's not going to happen in 2 weeks, bro.
No, I mean, I wish we could have built that story up over 8, 9, 10 months, before I would have even won the title. Yeah. But hindsight is 20/20. Yeah.
Chris, let me ask you this question. I'm trying to think about them in chronological order. Let me ask you this question first. I was consulting towards your tail end of TNA. Okay, and I'm watching you from my television set now because it was the big secret. Nobody could know I was working there, right? Chris, I got to ask you, the last stuff you did was with Velvet, okay? From a performer standpoint, in the whole time I had ever worked with you, that was the best I ever saw you. And I would write these rave reviews to John Gaborik that freaking Chris Sabin is knocking it out of the park. I've never seen him, this good, outside of wrestling-wise. I've never seen him perform this good. He's finally come into it. It was the best stuff I ever saw you do. So I got 2 questions for you, and one of them's a little personal. What were things breaking down between you and Velvet at that time? So when you were playing this out on TV, there were some real emotions there that helped bring a side out of you that didn't really depend on a lot of acting? That's my number 1 question.
I don't want to go too much into it, but I will answer it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I don't want you to go into. I'm just curious. But here's my number 2 question, Chris. I don't understand that. That's my problem with TNA. They do so many things I don't understand. I know I was in the room with them. Like, I'd go to Nashville and I would book with them. I was in the room with them when everybody was putting over your performance. To me, like, you really, like, reached a level now, like, holy crap, what happened? Your contract comes up and they don't renew it? I mean, what happens?
My contract came up and, they offered me a new 2-year deal, but it was the same deal that I was on before.
Did you try to negotiate it, or?
Yeah, I tried to negotiate. I tried to get, it's kind of like each year my contract was a little more. Finally, after then, they completely changed the contracts. And it was completely different. A lot of what was in the stuff that was consistently in my contracts for like the first 8-9 years wasn't there anymore. I stayed. It's kind of what happened when, my partner Alex left and I stayed. It was because like our contracts were completely restructured and different. I thought, by showing my loyalty that, it would pay off. So, I stayed and he left. So I tried to negotiate something. I want a little more. Of course. Every year, you make a little more. And if you're doing good, you think, you get a little more each year. They weren't having it. They just, it is what it was, and, take it or leave it. So I was kind of like, well, I guess I'm 33 at this point. This might be my last chance ever to go for that. The goal, the reason why I even got into the wrestling business, what I watched was as a little kid was WWF. And this is probably my last chance to even ever try, because I've never had a tryout there. I've never been seen by them, nothing, because I've been under contract with TNA since I was 21 years old. And I'm 33 now. I figure, this is probably my last chance. If I'm ever going to give it, one last go for the big time, then I've got to do it now. So that basically was the biggest, what weighed in on my reason the most.
So did you get that opportunity with them? I mean, what happened?
I haven't had it yet. I still haven't had it. I'm working towards it, but there's only so much you can do.
Bro,
right?
with the mouth the more has, and all these connections the more has, he can't make that happen.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe being a TNA guy for 11 years is hurting me. I don't know. I always thought that, being in TNA before trying to go there was like the right path, because, hey, 11 years of television experience, I know how to work the cameras and all that TV style of wrestling. Like, I feel like I can adapt to it because I've had so much experience doing it, and just, experience with all the guys that have, come through TNA, all the veterans that I've been able to work with. I've been able to learn from them. So I just thought I was taking the right path. But who knows? Maybe at this point it's hurting me.
Bro, you know what? If you sit there and try to figure out the psychology of WWE and what goes through their mind, good luck, bro. Good, because I work there and I still can't figure it out. Hey, Chris, I want to ask you this a little bit on a personal note, not getting into the relationship, but dating another performer, for a good period of time. Is that difficult, bro? Is it easier to date somebody that's in the same profession with you, or is that more challenging, and does that create problems?
I think it's easier from like the having a girlfriend perspective, because, hey, you get to go home and not have to be around them for like weeks at a time, so you don't have to worry about whatever, taking them out to dinner or all that boyfriend girlfriend stuff. When you're at home, you're away from them. So when you're on the road, it becomes exciting to see them because you haven't seen them. So it's all just like, it's nothing but good times. But of course it creates problems after a while. That just can't keep that up forever. After a while, the long distance thing and being in the business, like, you're going to get like jealous feelings, you just can't help it. It's just natural human instinct to get, the jealousy and stuff that's going to happen because, like, especially with a girl like her, she's going to get a lot of attention, especially attention from other men. And, it's even though I'm still a laid back, easygoing person, you're still going to have the natural human jealousy that just comes with dating a girl like that. So, it's good and bad.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, let me ask you this now, because I'm 54 years old. I'm still learning. So we've had a great conversation here, Chris. I mean, you've enlightened me about a lot of things. You've really helped me understand the mindset of a 33-year-old professional wrestler. I really not. I can talk about these things now because you helped me understand some things. But I like to continue. I think life's a journey, bro. We learn every single day, no matter how old we are. In the position I was in to effectively get through somebody much younger than me, 20 year age difference. What could I have done differently? I mean, what should my tact have been to really make, that generation really understand where I was coming from and really, looking out for their best interests rather than them think, oh, Vince Russo hates wrestling. How could my presentation have been different? What should I have done?
Are you like referring to like, let's say during the X Division days?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I don't know, because I just kind of think of like the mindset that my group of people were in back then, like like I said, we were so young. We're all in our young 20s, being thrown on national television as wrestlers. We were making a living off wrestling. And I just think like our egos probably had a lot to do with blocking a lot of it. Probably just not even wanting to absorb like, oh no, we know what we're doing. We got this without, trying to put that, listen to advice and stuff. I think a lot of us would listen to advice, but at the same time, we would kind of think we knew what we were doing at the same time. Yeah. If you know what I'm saying, like, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure you could have done anything differently.
You know what it is, Chris? It wasn't you guys. It's the generation. Chris, my kids are, my son's going to be 28. My other son's 25. You can't tell, especially males, you can't tell males that age anything. And that's the tough part of being a parent. Like, the same with the X Division guys. Like, I know I'm telling them this stuff for their own good, but I know they're going to have to go out and learn the hard way anyway. That was the toughest part of my job, because what I'm trying to do is, save you some time. You know what I'm saying, Chris? If you cut down on the ring work a little bit, bro, maybe you'll get 3 more years out of your career. You know what I'm saying? So I'm really trying to, but it's, again, being that age, bro, and you're full of the piss and the vinegar and the adrenaline. I totally get it. I totally understand it. But here's what I love about it, Chris. You and I can have that conversation. You can understand where I'm coming from. I can understand where you're coming from. But, bro, there are some guys literally that won't talk to me. Bro, I've invited them on the show. And I said, let's talk it out on the show, because, Chris, you know what it is that pisses me off? Like, any heat I have in the wrestling business is because of it's all business. It's not because of Vince Russo, the guy. It's because maybe our psychology was different. But to me, and our psychology was different. But to me, when you take that and all of a sudden it becomes personal, life's just too short for that, bro,
Yeah, definitely. You definitely got to separate the business from the personal side of everything, of course.
Yeah. So, Chris, listen, before we wrap up, give me, where can we reach Chris on Twitter, on Facebook? If we want to book Chris, where do we go? Give me all that good stuff, bro.
Actually, I don't have a Facebook, so any Facebook on there is fake. I do have a Twitter. It's like the only social media thing I have, at Project Sabin. I can be reached for bookings, chrissabinbookings@gmail.com. I have a website, chrissabin.net, which I have a webmaster update it for me every once in a while. That's pretty much it.
Hey, Chris, are you going over to that next IPW show?
No.
I'm so sorry I missed you now, but I hope you can understand why.
Hey, I understand why. No worries.
Chris, listen, I'm so happy we had this conversation. You've enlightened me. I've learned a lot. I mean, I really have. But like I said, bro, I knew we can do this because you were always, you and Alex, he's just not here right now. You guys were always so respectful, to me. And I knew there were times you didn't agree with me, but you never had an attitude. You never had a chip on your shoulder. You were always so nice and so respectful. That's why I knew we could have this conversation. And if I wanted to have it with anybody, it was you. So, I want to thank you not only for this, but, the opportunity of working for you because, bro, again, you're a great wrestler. But I think what's more important than that, Chris, is I think you're a great human being.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing me on. I've had a good time and I've enjoyed our conversation. So thank you very much.
All right, well, don't go anywhere, bro, because I want to give you a personal send-off. But listen, everybody, that is this edition of The Swerve. Very enjoyable episode for me. I have to be totally honest with you. I loved having the conversation with Chris. I want to understand the youth of America because if I don't, I'm going to be that old crotchety Dana Carvey character, back in my day. No, it doesn't work that way. Some things are better today than they were back in my day. That's why I'm glad Chris enlightened me on a few things. But listen, everybody, that's it for this episode, and we'll be right back here next week on The Swerve. I'll catch you all on the rebound. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Put it on a pole again. Put it on a pole.